Thank you for that. I'm assuming that that was only nice things, but since I don't speak French, this is the benefit of the doubt, so I appreciate it. Oh, okay, perfect. So I am really excited to be here to talk to you about a little bit of my journey with learning that kata and scientific thinking is more than meets the eye, and how I have learned how to start organizations and teams to practice this thinking. And you may notice that I'm taking a phrase from one of my favorite 1984 cartoons, Transformers, and I have a toy with me because this is what really inspired me to become an engineer. My brother and I, my older brother, 3 years older, would watch Transformers in English, not Japanese, I don't know that language either, during our entire childhood, and we would play in the backyard, and I just really loved how these toys look like one thing, but then transform into something else, right? From a truck to a person. And that's one thing that inspired me to want to become an engineer to actually make toys like this. And what I love about these is they are more than meets the eye. There is so much more in here, and they're designed to change and transform. If only humans were designed to change and transform, that would make everything much easier. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And what I learned through hearing about kata and scientific thinking was that it is also more than meets the eye. There are layers to the improvement kata. At the first glance, it looks just like a PDCA cycle, PDSA cycle, which it is. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you start to see, this might actually also be a method of improvement, which it is. But if you keep digging and you keep going, you then begin to see that this is a pattern to teach people and teach our brains to think scientifically. One layer deeper, though, and it's actually a pattern to teach coaches how to teach people. And so there are so many layers to kata, and this is something that I learned over the course of many years. And we all want this. We all want our teams and organizations to build in these muscles and layers so that over time, everybody in the organization begins to think scientifically, problem solve scientifically, and improve this way. But there are some problems, just a few. Some things that occur that I've seen over many years is people think, how is this really any different than what we already do, than our current problem solving, than our current Kaizen? So that's the first problem we encounter. And then the second problem, the second line of thinking is, well, hold on. Do I do kata or do I do our problem solving and Kaizen that I'm used to? Which do I choose? Because if you're not careful and you don't dig to those deeper layers, it just looks like another tool and not the deeper thinking pattern. And then the last one that we run into when you do get past that into those deeper layers of thinking is this issue with, hold on, I don't have time to do that every day. I am a very busy adult with many important things to do. I can't practice this every single day. And so this is what I ran into over many years trying to integrate and practice scientific thinking. And I'd love to tell you a little bit of my story. So I'm going to take you back, way back into 2013, when the word selfie was added to the dictionary, fun fact, and Frozen just came out. So we're back in 2013. I am a young, excited engineer, and I found this amazing book called Toyota Kata. And I'm like, oh my God, I love this. This is the best thing I've ever heard of. I see it everywhere. It's perfect. This is the missing link to my lean and continuous improvement practices. And so, of course, immediately I'm like, I can coach. I've read the book. I can do this. So I find a poor, unsuspecting colleague, and I said, you're going to do this with me. We build a storyboard. We stand up to coach. And I'm like, this is going to work. Do you know what happened? Yeah, nothing good. Because it turns out you can't just jump in and start coaching. Lesson 1. So after this, I learned that the real problem that we're facing is not the kata, and it's not engagement. The problem is we're trying to implement kata and scientific thinking instead of integrating. We try to overwrite current systems that already exist in a team or an organization. and they already have good systems. When we try to take those down and replace them with this new thing, it will crumble, and they will never trust you again to do something like this. So that is the difference here. So after I learned this, I've now practiced in 5 different companies over 10 years, and as an engineer by trade, thinking like an engineer, not very socially adept, I've now learned through practicing with all of my companies that I've worked with, and now with clients, and as I coach and practice in the scientific thinking community, I've learned some hard lessons about what not to do, which I'm going to share a lot of that, and what to do to actually start practicing in your organizations. So let's check in. Let's check in with where I'm at 8 years later. It's 2021. I've got Kata on the brain because I've now practiced for a few years with the Kata Girl Geeks, and I've learned my ways. I've learned the air that I can't just jump in and coach. I have to learn the improvement Kata pattern, learn to be a learner before I can coach anybody. And to give us context, 2021 was the year that the amazing hit show Squid Game from South Korea came out, and the not so wonderful movement of #FreeBritney. That's where we are in 2021. It's okay. So what happens is I am now a leader at GE Aerospace. So Katie and I have this interesting connection. So I am now seeing Kata everywhere I look, in every system, in everything I see. It's like when you want a dog and you see dogs everywhere, that's what it was. Everything was Kata everywhere I see. And I'm a business leader now, so I've got people, I can make them do things because I have authority. Don't worry, I didn't do that. What I did do, though, was ask some people, hey, are you interested? Would you want to practice this? I had a few eager volunteers, so 3 learners that I took through the improvement kata. It went a little better. There was a lot of teaching, which was fine. We made it through 1 challenge, and then it kind of fizzled out. But I would mark that as a small win, which was finding people that were interested versus trying to force it on others that don't want to practice. But still, they got disengaged over time because they didn't see the connection with what they were doing every day and the other systems that they were working with. And then eventually, again, a little bit of a dumpster fire. But from these 2 experiences, I learned and came up with this S.T.A.R.T framework, which is what I have used over the last 10 months in my current organization, and it has actually worked for now. So we're going to walk through this together. So the very first thing is to study the current systems. This is like grasping the current condition, because our challenge is to get that scientific thinking mindset in our teams and organizations. But we have to understand what is happening now, what systems exist, and what do they do? So how do your teams and organizations problem solve, think about improvement? What do they do right now to teach and coach others, instead of just trying to shove scientific thinking and kata on top or to replace it? What is happening now with our systems? And when I started to study the systems in my organization, I saw a lot of things. There was one big huddle, we were doing action tracking, we were really reactive, people were only, too far. No, too late. Lots of bad things were happening. And I noticed that there was a lot of gaps in their thinking. And so I'd ask you, take a brief moment, and just think about what systems exist in your team and organization, whether or not they are, ripe for integrating into scientific thinking. Just what are those systems? And if you have a pen, write them down. Just think about that. What are all of the systems that you know exist that you could look at? And then once you have identified the systems, then we can move on to the second step, which is the T in S.T.A.R.T, which is, now that you've seen the systems, study how people are thinking inside of those systems. Right? How does your team and organization think about identifying problems and improvements? How do they think about solving them? What words do they use? The words that they use will tell you a lot about how they're thinking about things. And there's a really beautiful guide from Gemma Jones that helps with this. So here's what I was seeing. This is Gemma Jones' How to See and Hear Scientific Thinking. And along this axis, I began to see where my teams were thinking from a scientific thinking perspective with all of these characteristics. So for you, reflect on your teams and organizations, and inside of those systems, where might they be? Where is their thinking? Because sometimes you might have people who are very engaged in learning and curiosity like I had, but you're just missing evidence-based or specific or hypothesis-driven, methodical. You might be missing certain characteristics. And it's really important to understand the thinking here, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not that you're going to start from scratch or zero and move in. People have different realms and different areas that they're in with thinking. So how would you rate? How would you rate your team? Once you've done this, then it's time to pick one system, just like picking one obstacle. Select a system to work on, because we need to keep the blast radius small here. So which one system do we want to try to inject scientific thinking into? And some things to consider: how frequently is it used? Because that's going to help with how much they practice this new way of thinking. Who's involved? And if there are any risks with that system. So be cautious here. Don't use something and don't make a drastic change to a system that the whole team really engages with and holds tight. Keep that blast radius small. And then it's time to retool with a very small change. So looking at this area of scientific thinking, how can you nudge one area of thinking closer to scientific? Just a little closer. And very importantly, because we are all scientists here and practicing, what do you expect? Set your hypothesis for, if I nudge this area, how will the whole thinking shift? And how will the step I take infect and evolve the thinking? So I wanted to nudge evidence-based. That was the first nudge I made. And what we added were metrics, because when we had our morning huddle, it was just actions, there were no measures. My hypothesis was that if we had metrics, people could then begin to see the connection, the cause and effect of their actions to the metrics, and we could start talking evidence-based language. But without the evidence, we couldn't see that. There we go. So for your system, this one system, what's the nudge? What's the small change that you would want to make and try? And what would you expect to happen? Make sure that you write that hypothesis down. That's really important. And then the last letter in our START is to test and iterate, because if you think you're done, that's funny, but you've only just started, right? After that first experiment, what do you learn? What could be better? What would you do differently? How did it affect the thinking? What will you try next? And I'm very excited to share that now in 2025, I've been practicing with my current organization for 10 months, and although wonderful things have happened, like Beyonce winning Album of the Year, 4th Black woman ever to win, that's amazing, there are also some less good things, like the United States going crazy. But I've been practicing for 10 months. We have integrated experimenting records into our daily management and our problem solving, the scientific thinking process, and our site leadership team has been practicing coaching for the past 6 to 8 weeks, and they love it. And they see now the power that this thinking can have. But it's only because we made these small changes. So imagine for you if you were able, with these small nudges, to shift the thinking in the organization. And all you have to do is start. That's it. And don't do it alone. Get help from the Kata community and from all of us out here. Thank you.